Imagine someone spending their entire life loving something, only for that very thing to ultimately become the cause of their misery and demise. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's dive into our story. Today's case takes us to the state of Florida in the United States. We all know how bizarre Florida can be. Every now and then, we browse the news only to read headlines like, "Florida man does this," or "Florida woman does that," usually accompanied by the strangest mugshots. It feels like the only thing missing is a Florida child headline. However, this time we are heading to the village of Wellington. This is one of the most upscale neighborhoods you could ever see. Quiet, cozy, and its streets are lined with massive houses and villas. In fact, the biggest problem that could ever happen there is someone parking their car on the street instead of in the garage. I swear, just look at the picture. Not a single car is parked on the curb. Anyway, in 1972, a new family moved there. A wife named Marlene, her new husband Mike Warren, and her two sons, Joseph and John, from her first marriage. Right after they moved in, the neighbors instantly took a liking to them. To the surrounding community, Marlene and Mike were the absolute picture-perfect couple. Socially, they were beloved, kind-hearted, and never hesitated to help anyone. Professionally, they were highly successful. As soon as they relocated, they opened a used car rental business that became booming. Did they decide to just spend the money and party with friends? No, both of them were incredibly smart, especially Marlene. She began buying real estate property and renting it out under her own name. So, they had money coming in from the car business as well as the real estate properties. Their wealth grew immensely, and their life was luxurious, peaceful, and absolutely perfect. But life doesn't always stay that way. Their world suddenly turned pitch black in 1988, when, unfortunately, Marlene's son, John, was killed in a tragic car accident. Marlene plunged into a state of profound grief that words cannot describe. I believe losing a son or a daughter is the ultimate nightmare for any parent. Because of this, everyone rallied around her, from her friends to her colleagues and neighbors. Marlene was a social butterfly and deeply loved, so everyone wanted to support her. Yet, despite how crucial this emotional support was, it still couldn't erase the deep sorrow inside her heart. The only thing that comforted her and kept her going was painting. She would spend hours painting landscapes like trees and the sea, but other times, she would paint clowns. Yes, I swear. While clowns are a source of sheer terror for many people, Marlene, on the contrary, had an abnormal obsession with them. She loved them dearly. To her, they were the ones that gave her a sense of safety, to the point where she had been collecting clown figurines, paintings, and memorabilia since she was a little girl. Maybe that's why she felt safe around them. They reminded her of her childhood when life was simple. But between you and me, Marlene certainly didn't know or expect that one of these clowns would ultimately be her end and murder her. On the 26th of May, 1990, Marlene was sitting at home with her son Joseph, whose leg was broken. 3 of his friends were over to spend the day with him, have breakfast, and hang out. As for her husband Mike, he wasn't home. He had gone with his business partner to attend a horse race in Miami. It was a perfectly normal day, but at around 10:45 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Marlene got up to answer it, and when she opened it, she saw something that made her incredibly happy. Standing at the door was a clown, wearing white gloves, an orange wig, and of course, the signature red nose. In their right hand, the clown held a red balloon that read, "You are the greatest," and in the left hand, a white balloon featuring Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, along with a box full of flowers. While this situation would seem highly suspicious to anyone else, honestly, I would have slammed the door in their face. Marlene didn't just find it ordinary, she smiled warmly. She assumed it was a surprise gift from her husband or one of her friends, since everyone knew how much she adored clowns. Meanwhile, Joseph and his friends were inside eating, when suddenly, they heard a gunshot. They all rushed to the door, even Joseph with his broken leg, and were met with a horrific scene. Marlene was collapsed on the floor, bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound to her head. The balloons and flowers were still there. It was a terrifying sight. When they looked outside, since the door was still wide open, they saw the clown walking away with absolute calm, getting into a car, and driving off. Joseph and his friends tried to chase after the vehicle, but the clown had already escaped. The commotion and gunfire drew all the neighbors out, who immediately called the police and paramedics. Marlene was rushed to the hospital, where she went straight into surgery and then into intensive care in a desperate attempt to save her life. Simultaneously, the police launched an immediate investigation. Witnesses told them that the killer, the clown, had brown eyes, stood about 180 centimeters tall, wore black shoes with white gloves, and fled in a white Chrysler LeBaron. This was excellent information, especially knowing the car model. However, in reality, it wasn't that simple. The clown disguise completely masked the killer's features, and that specific car model was extremely common in America at the time. The police were hoping Marlene would wake up to identify her attacker, but unfortunately, she passed away 2 days later. Now, the police had to gather leads from elsewhere. They questioned her husband, Mike. Did he suspect anyone? Was there anything unusual lately? He said no, stating, "I don't suspect anyone in particular, but I guess the killer might be a hitman, because my wife didn't have any personal conflicts with anyone." Next, they spoke with her son, Joseph. The young man provided critical insight. He revealed that after his brother John died, while everyone else was supporting his mother to comfort her, Mike was completely emotionally absent and distant. He wasn't the Mike they used to know. Although they initially excused his behavior, thinking he just didn't know how to express his grief, Mike remained cold and started picking massive fights over the pettiest reasons, such as throwing a huge tantrum just because Marlene served him 3 pickles for lunch instead of 2. Joseph emphasized that the atmosphere at home had become toxic. The son's statement immediately made the police suspicious of Mike. When investigators discovered that Marlene possessed a massive fortune and real estate registered solely in her name, their slight suspicion turned into a major lead. As you all know, and as we always say, in homicide cases like this, the perpetrator usually turns out to be the victim's partner. And the red flags didn't stop there. Marlene's own mother went to the police and stated she suspected Mike. Why? Because before her death, Marlene had been hinting to her that she felt Mike might betray her or do something sinister to her at any moment. The police were on the verge of frustration. Where on earth was this clown hiding? But they didn't give up. They interrogated everyone associated with the family and even went to Mike's used car dealership to interview the employees, hoping someone had noticed something unusual. It was there that a breakthrough began to emerge, as one particular name kept coming up over and over again: Sheila Keene. Who was Sheila? She was a 7-year-old employee at the dealership, known for her strong, no-nonsense, and assertive personality. When the police asked why her name kept popping up, the employees dropped a bombshell. They stated they were certain Mike and Sheila were having a secret affair. They were seen together constantly, sharing an intimacy that completely crossed the boundaries of a typical manager-employee relationship. One frustrated worker even told the officer, "Look, officer, I've been working overtime here for 5 months, and I haven't seen a single extra dime in my paycheck." While naturally, with this new information, the police now had a prime suspect, Sheila Keene. When investigators dug deeper into Sheila's background, they uncovered a bombshell. She held a license for a handgun, and not just any gun, but the exact caliber and type used to murder Marlene. This was an incredible lead. The police brought both Mike and Sheila in and placed them in separate interrogation rooms. However, they completely denied everything. Their stories matched in every single detail without a single discrepancy, and they steadfastly maintained that their relationship was strictly professional. When investigators confronted Mike, asking, "Why are you paying her house rent then?" he replied with sheer audacity, "Folks, I just like doing good deeds. Are you going to judge me for charity? All right, Mike, we'll see about that." The police then turned to Sheila and asked about her whereabouts at the time of the crime. She claimed she wasn't at the dealership because she was looking for a customer who was late on returning a rental car. When they asked for any proof, or even the customer's address, she flatly refused to provide anything, claiming it was proprietary business information. Naturally, this move made them look incredibly guilty, but at the same time, there was no hard evidence to warrant an arrest. Sheila wasn't the only person in America who owned that type of handgun, and hers was legally registered, so there was no legal ground to hold her. But the police didn't give up. They kept digging. Detectives began canvassing every single shop in the area to track down the source of the clown costume and the balloons. Remarkably, they found the exact shop where the killer had purchased everything. And as fate would have it, these items were bought just 2 days before the murder. However, the buyer had paid in cash, meaning there was no credit card trail to track through the bank. When they showed Sheila's photo to the store clerks, they said she strongly resembled the buyer, but they couldn't be 100% certain. Shortly after, the police received a tip about a car matching the description of the clown's vehicle. It had been parked in a lot for 4 days without anyone approaching it. Detectives rushed to the scene and searched the vehicle, unearthing 2 critical pieces of evidence. First, a long strand of brown hair which perfectly matched Sheila's hair color, and second, bright orange fibers that perfectly matched the fibers from the clown wig the police had purchased for comparison. Now they had a hair sample resembling Sheila's and the gun connection. They needed a search warrant for her house. A few days later, they secured the warrant and raided her home. Although they found neither the clown suit nor the weapon, they discovered fibers from the orange clown wig inside her wardrobe. When compared to the fibers found in the car, they were an exact match. Furthermore, they took a hair sample directly from Sheila and compared it to the brown hair from the car. It was a 100% match. So, let's arrest her. But wait a second. There were 2 small problems. First, while the hair in the car matched hers, it could also potentially match about 4% of the white American population, as those characteristics are quite common. You might ask, why not just do a DNA test and wrap it up? That brings us to the second problem. In 1990, DNA testing was still in its absolute infancy, and it was not yet admissible as official evidence in American courts. Imagine that after all this evidence, the police still didn't have a legally viable case to make an arrest, so the case went cold. Yet, the police never backed down. Detectives vowed they would eventually catch Mike and Sheila. As the quiet investigation continued, they uncovered 2 startling facts. First, the clown's getaway car turned out to be stolen from a direct competitor of Mike's dealership. Second, Mike was exposed as a massive fraudster. He was tampering with car odometers to overcharge renters and was filing fraudulent insurance claims for stolen cars that weren't actually stolen. Due to these schemes, in 1994, Mike faced a massive trial where he was convicted of 43 counts of grand theft and fraud and sentenced to 3 years in prison. As for Sheila, she got off scot-tangent free. When those 3 years passed, and Mike was released in 1997, the very first thing he did was seize Marlene's entire fortune, which was worth around $1 million, and vanish. You might ask me, how? Why didn't her son Joseph get that money? Well, even though much of the real estate was in Marlene's name, The legal structure and state laws at the time dictated that upon her death, all assets defaulted to her corporation, managed by her husband Mike. I felt incredibly bad for Joseph. His brother was gone, his mother was murdered, the money his mother worked so hard to secure for them was stolen, and to make matters worse, his mother's murder case was officially classified as unsolved. Years and decades passed, and the file sat forgotten in a drawer for 27 long years, leaving Joseph unable to get justice for his mother. That was until 2017, when a detective reviewing cold cases stumbled upon Marlene Warren's file. Shocked by what he read, he wondered how a case with so much evidence could remain unsolved. Immediately, investigators pulled the old evidence, most notably the brown hair from the car and Sheila's hair sample. Utilizing modern, advanced DNA technology, which by now was fully admissible in court, the result came back, a 100% identical match. The issue in the past was the law, not police incompetence. Detectives quickly assembled their team and headed to Sheila's house to finally arrest her, only to find she had moved away years ago. However, the investigation tracked her down, revealing she had changed her name, dyed her hair blonde, and was currently living in Tennessee with her husband. And who do you think her husband was? I'll let you guess. Yes, it was Mike Warren himself. The two had married in 2002 in Las Vegas after Mike got out of prison and secured the money. To make things even more bizarre and infuriating, they had opened a restaurant together in Tennessee called the Purple Cow. But the police didn't rush. Before making the arrest, they launched a discreet, under-the-radar investigation to build an airtight case. They learned from the restaurant employees that Sheila would often walk around the restaurant dressed up in a clown costume to entertain customers. Talk about dark humor and sheer audacity. The man marries the woman suspected of killing his wife, and that very woman wears a clown suit to entertain guests in their restaurant. In September 2017, the police closed in and arrested Sheila. Strangely, while she was in the police cruiser being transported, she didn't ask about her fate. Instead, she asked a highly suspicious question. Did you arrest Mike too? Or not yet? It was a telling sign that Mike was involved, but no matter how much the police investigated him, his alibi from the day of the crime remained unbreakable. The plan had been perfect. He went to the races to establish an alibi, and she executed the crime. The only way to convict him was if she confessed against him, which she never did. Sheila stayed silent, and Mike continued to deny any knowledge. Thus, Sheila faced the charges 100% on her own. However, in court, her defense attorneys played a clever and dangerous game. They argued that the orange fibers didn't necessarily come from a clown wig. They could have come from common carpets or clothing. They dropped an even bigger bombshell by proving that the evidence bags had not been properly sealed over those 27 years, meaning the evidence was compromised and legally inadmissible. Joseph's attorneys were furious, arguing that the case had been clear as day for decades, so why the delay? But the law is the law. The bitter legal battle dragged on for 6 grueling years, filled with endless trial postponements. Ultimately, the prosecution decided to offer Sheila a plea deal. If she confessed in open court to the murder of Marlene, the charge would be reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, carrying a significantly lighter sentence. Sure enough, Sheila accepted the plea deal. She stood before the court and confessed to murdering Marlene, completely leaving Mike's name out of it. Although she never explicitly stated her motive, the reason behind the crime was crystal clear: money and love. With Marlene out of the picture, they could easily be together and seize the massive fortune. Consequently, in 2023, the court sentenced her to 12 years in prison. However, what makes this even more infuriating and mind-boggling is that she barely spent any time behind bars. In November 2024, just 16 months after her sentencing, Sheila was released from prison. You might wonder, how on earth did that happen? The reason is that she had to be tried under the Florida state laws of 1990, the time when the crime was committed. Back then, the regulations were incredibly generous regarding time off for good behavior, known as gain time. When you combine those massive good behavior deductions with the credit she received for the 6 years she spent in jail awaiting trial, it mathematically allowed her to walk free after a shockingly short period. Today she is out, back with Mike, running their restaurant, and living their lives completely normally as if nothing ever happened. Honestly, it's deeply frustrating and forces you to think about the flaws within the legal system. Everything was obvious. The evidence was right there. But what can you do? I feel incredibly heartbroken for her son, Joseph. His entire family is gone. He was denied true justice, and he didn't receive a single dime from the wealth his mother worked herself to the bone to build for her children. It is truly a profound, unfair tragedy. And with that, today's case comes to a close. I am very eager to know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you think justice was served, or did the system fail Marlene? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a like. See you in the next case. Take care.